Hey everyone, Sean here, and today in this video I wanted to sit down and talk about the Netflix One Piece live action series, which has been something a number of people have been sort of waiting for out of sheer curiosity, including myself. It's been quite the road to anticipation, starting from the rumors, just word of mouth, that the Netflix or live action One Piece was in the works of sorts. And I remember making a video, kind of making fun of myself of how dreaded I was to the idea of my favorite just series of all time, for anime slash manga. It's my number one, and having seen this become are getting a live action series, that was something I did not like seeing the idea of it, and yeah, going all the way up to to the trailer. I was quite skeptical, and when it first came out, I did like the sets, or the videos showing the sets. I did like the sets, the ships and stuff like that. So there was some sort of like glimmer of hope that it was going to be something that would be at least good or decent, I should say, or maybe okay. It basically means the more videos came out, the more curious I was, and then all the way up to this point, the on Netflix has already come out with all eight episodes, which that of itself had me skeptical of how the pacing was going to go and my expectations and stuff like that. They were quite low, and having to come out watching this in 2 nights, I've come to conclude that it definitely isn't for me. There are a number of things I am very picky about when it comes to One Piece, because I just love it so much. Now, that being said, is this like the worst thing that Netflix has ever put out ever since Cowboy Bebop? I would say no. I think I can confidently say that this is not Cowboy Bebop qualities of live action anime, right? While there were some little specks of diamonds in the Cowboy Bebop rough, you can definitely see a lot more of those here in the One Piece live action series than the former. Now, that of course that's not saying much, but I guess it's still something. It definitely is, I guess, the quote unquote the best one out there for Netflix, but I think it still has a long road to being called the sort of like the curse breaking of live action anime. Live action anime has always had this sort of reputation for being pretty bad, right? Just because of the nuances that animes come with, or just cartoons and other things in general. Like live action adaptations has always had this dreaded idea, right? Of just not only making more money, just cash cowing it, but just, I don't know, to exercise the need for bringing in certain celebrities or just marketing purposes and stuff like that. And a lot of those have come out pretty rough, including, of course, Cowboy Bebop. There are some exceptions like Rurouni Kenshin, right? And that one, I think, is still the best live action anime adaptation in general, like just anything, right, out there. I think Rurouni Kenshin takes that still. But is One Piece up there? I guess you could say that, right? But again, there are a number of things I have negatives for. And so I'll finally go over those right now without spoiling things. And then later on, I will begin to spoil things after I give it a score. I have my general notes up there over the camera, but I think really why I did say it's okay, it's the best thing it's out there for Netflix when it comes to live action anime. It definitely is far from like something I'm like, whoa, this is great, this is awesome, I'm blown away kind of thing. there are a number of problems that kind of were huge detriments to me. And the biggest one of them all, I'll just get this out of the way, is of course the fact that it is 8 episodes. So naturally, the brisk pacing definitely takes away a lot of the magic that I think what makes One Piece, right? I think there is a reason why One Piece has gone so long, has been number one in graphic novel sales within the manga industry. There's a ton of reasons why it's still here after many, many years, as someone who has read it from, started reading and watching from 2004, right? And I believe the anime came out in 97-ish, late 90s. So that's why the age is definitely there when you want to go from the beginning. So, point being, I'm a huge One Piece fan, hardcore if you want to call it that, whatever. I've been there for a long time. I've stuck with it for a very long time. I'm caught up with the Wano stuff, and I'm of course caught up with the current arc of the manga at the moment. I've been always trying to keep up with it as much as I can, especially with the manga, and that's kind of the where my place is as a One Piece fan going into this. So it's definitely was an interesting 8 episodes just to see how it turned out. A lot of the huge things that what makes One Piece is lost. Otherwise, it just comes off as an imitation that, yes, is a very passionate imitation, but an imitation no less, and therefore doesn't quite bring out what brings One Piece to the table, at least in my eyes anyway. So, because of those things, the pacing obviously is very fast, and I think it's too fast to the point where they just kind of gloss over some things and just kind of just get to sort of the meat and potatoes without bringing in the seasoning, all the other important ingredients and recipe within the recipe to make this a very well put out dish that stands out, even though it has simplistic ingredients and stuff like that. So it's just like it. So these key scenes that you see in One Piece, right, that are brought in real life, they only bring so much to the table. It just lacks that impact. It just comes off as just dry. The impact is just doesn't quite bring it out, and therefore is pretty much wasted, I'd say. It could have been so much better executed if they actually took the time, even within maybe the 8 episodes, for certain things. Even if they it's definitely difficult to do, of course, but that's why you have to be a lot more competent in the sort of storyboarding and the writing department when you're planning to do these things. I think it's definitely possible, but it definitely is very difficult to do so within the 8 episodes. Maybe 10 could have been the beginning of it to see some promising things for the pacing, if they want to go with that. But it definitely didn't happen for a lot of these moments. So, of course, the proper context gets lost and such like that. There are a lot of storylines within the arcs lost that help build up these characters, right? That's why, Luffy is quite complicating even though he's on the surface through and through a shonen character. A lot of people who look from the outside in, it's just like, oh, he's just a guy who wants to be king of the pirates. He wants to be the best. What shonen character doesn't want to be the best? A lot of characters take that trait quite commonly, of course. But if you're willing to take the time to look into Luffy, there's quite a lot going on with Luffy. And a lot of these storylines help sort of bring that out of Luffy, and of course other characters too. It definitely makes these characters a lot more interesting, and it really brings out each member, right, as to why they're here, why they're important, why they stand out, and such like that. There are a lot of very interesting in-betweens that gets lost, like I've been saying, with this one. And I think they're pretty important to help, again, make these characters interesting. So all that gets lost, unfortunately. So therefore, that's already losing points for me, especially when, when there's that important scene with Zoro, holding up the sword, making his second vow, essentially, to Luffy. And, that lacks that impact so much because we didn't really we didn't really have the journey to get there, right? He's already saying these lines when we've only seen these characters for so long within the Netflix pacing. It definitely lacks that impact for sure. So that gets wasted just because they really want to just get to these scenes, right? So the sustenance is definitely lacking there when One Piece has so much to offer, Now, of course, it's definitely, yes, like I said, I understand that that is a difficult thing to sort of like stuff into these 8 episodes and such like that, but I would like to at least see an attempt to bring something to help uplift these characters, because otherwise, for the majority of these scenes, it just comes off as surface level, it just comes off as Luffy happened to be there and wants to whoop these bad guys' asses and stuff like that. Some of those notes do hit a little bit. I'm not gonna say that it's completely non-existent, but but like I'm saying, a lot of that gets lost. So that's like the major gripe that I have with this Netflix series. Well, otherwise, some of the negatives are kind of like nitpicking observations and stuff like that, but I'll try to go over them, as competently as possible. So some of the other ones is like the dialogue, right? Some of the dialogue doesn't quite land well, and not so much the lines themselves, but the delivery, right? I felt like some of the takes were not the best choices. I would say there could have been better takes on it, especially with the stuff with Kaya. There was like one line where it's like probably one of the most important like revelations, right? And her line kind of just like comes off as a little mild there, given the situation of things. So I wish that either she was given the opportunity to do more takes, or whoever took that take didn't quite made the right choice there, or whatever the case may be. And you have to remember that the studio here is the same studio with the Cowboy Bebop stuff, so it definitely kind of shows in some of these little scenes and stuff like that. It definitely still has that like that cosplaying theater sort of like vibes to it with some of the acting here, and it just can't be helped. It's that anime translation into live action. It still has that sort of nuance that carries over from the Cowboy Bebop stuff. So that's another little nitpick I have with it, or observation I've seen with this product here. And as the dialogue, the fights were some of the fights were kind of rough on the edges. Some of them were pretty cool, admittedly, but a number of them were pretty rough on the edges. I don't want to specify some of them because, of course, that could come off as spoilers for those who are completely new to this. But I would say, one from the trailer, right? Mr. Seven versus Zoro. We've seen that in the trailer, and that one to me has some of those rough edges. But there was some bar fights, which could have been really cool, but some of the execution could have been a little better, in my opinion. Some of that impact was a little lacking, and that could have been come off like really cool potentially, but again, some of the hits and the the motions and stuff like that could have come off better. Now I don't know if like a number of these actors are doing this for the very first time, or it could have been the fight choreographer on for the team. Who knows? But it's still pretty rough, and it could be a first timer for any of those sides of this situation. But that's one I felt like was taking place here. Another gripe I have, this is definitely a nitpick, but this is something kind of annoyed me, was a number of these close-ups with the really strong bokeh effect in the background, which basically means it's super blurry in the background and they're like super up close with the subject, which in case is of course characters, right? And like these kind of shots are okay during like the intense moments when things are about to be happening. But these shots were overused, I think, to the point where these were carrying over during just like the normal conversations. It's pretty annoying. This was definitely present during the Cowboy Bebop stuff because, again, you have to remember, it's the same crew, it's the same studio. So that sort of artistic nuance carried over to here. That's that style that they like to do, I've noticed. And it's definitely noticeable, if you want to pay attention to that. So to me, it came off as pretty annoying to that point. It's just so much of that it could become a meme at some point if they do more of these live action animes. They just love those close-up shots, man. It's something, Another one I would like to say also for I would say a negative too, is that a number of these fights, major ones at that, were taking place in dark places. So with the buggy fight, we seen that in the trailer. The All-Along fight, we see that in the trailer as well. Those were pretty dark, right? The fight with Zoro and Mr. Seven also takes place at night, and except I would say I can let the fight between Luffy and Captain Kuro was acceptable because there is a context to it. There's a style that they wanted to go for in this Netflix series that I accept, but I'll get more into that in the spoiler section of things. That is acceptable, but for the rest of them, right, and in fact not just the fights, but a number of these key scenes were taking place in these like oddly lit places, right, which is kind of a disappointment for me. So, and including, of course, again, we've seen this in the trailer with Luffy and Nami, right, when Nami asks for Luffy's help with the Arlong stuff. So that scene also took place at night, and it becomes apparent that a number of these scenes are taking place at freaking night. The only other daytime scene with the fight is, of course, with Captain Morgan, when Luffy, Zoro, and Nami were all in that yard and fighting against the Marines, including Captain Morgan, of course. We've seen that in the trailer. And there's also one more fight, but I don't want to spoil that one. But yeah, so basically there's two daytime fights. Maybe, I guess, 3 if you want to count the fights with the side characters and stuff like that and all that. But when it comes to like the major fights with the main villains, they're taking place in those dark places for the most part. So again, that's like a disappointment on my end. I think it's maybe either something to hide the effects that could come through as flaws, or an artistic choice, and so I don't agree with it. It's what I'm trying to say here, and I hope that more of these fights are taking place at the appropriate time, context, and stuff like that. If it has to take place at night, sure, okay, but as long as it has a flow to it. But I like to see more fights in brightly lit places, is what I hope to see more if this if there is a plan to continue this. And this is kind of like this last note is kind of like a between of a good and a bad, or pro, con, negative, positive. The fan service here is pretty respectable for One Piece. There's a lot of things, little Easter eggs and such like that. It's really cool to see from like a nostalgic standpoint, and also just like other things, right? That's also pretty interesting with these extra little scenes and stuff like that. But again, a lot of it gets missed because of the pacing, likely budget as well, but and unfortunately is a miss on some of those key things, I say, especially with some of the side characters being missing and such like that, that ultimately help build up the Straw Hat character in question. So, for example, Usopp is missing the Usopp Pirates. There's no Johnny and Yosaku anywhere. I guess that's a spoiler of itself, but Johnny and Yosaku were buddies of Zoro's when Zoro was doing his bounty hunting stuff. And maybe they'll show up later on, but at that point it won't make sense. It's like, why then? It doesn't really bring anything to the table because they only had their time during the Baratier stuff and of course the Along Park stuff. Again, the fan service here is respectable as the mannerisms of on a number of these characters are pretty appropriate, if not matching with the character in the original story. So, including the villains, of course, even the laughs made it in there, including Arlong, of course, which is pretty nice. I respect that. And there were a number of just things that were pretty cute with this fan service. Don't want to say too much, don't want to give away too much, because of course that's kind of tying to spoilers in some ways, in some forms. But yeah, that's pretty much like all the major negatives I have. Otherwise, the rest of the negatives are kind of like nitpicks and observations in the spoiler side of things. Now I can kind of go over some of the positives that I wrote down on my notes that I've noticed here. And it could also be not nitpicks, but like the opposite of nitpicking, like just like little kudos or gravy points, I guess you could say, for the positives. And one of them actually are the accents. A number of people had problems with Garp's accent being strongly Irish / Scottish. I actually didn't mind it. I like the accents. They actually add more to the world of One Piece. That's something I did wish for on the Funimation side of things. I don't think Funimation did too much with the accents, and I think in fact they could play around with that more with a number of these characters. But here they definitely played around with it, including Garp being Irish / Scottish, which a number of people say, oh, it doesn't make sense because Luffy here is Brazilian, because he's being played by a Brazilian actor, right? And then speaking of which, yes, Godoy's accent does strongly come through here, and it's pretty funny. But a number of people just have been complaining about that, and I personally didn't find an issue with that, again, because it adds more to the world. I think that's pretty neat. That's kind of like one of the things I do look forward to when it comes to different dubs, right? Just accents, because the Japanese language, as someone who does speak it with his mom and stuff like that, and a number of people, accents just don't really happen. It's just dialects, and as much, I mean, well, accents, it kind of is very specific, including or specifically like referring to like Nagoya Ben and Kansai and Hiroshima and Gifu and Okinawa, of course, like things like that, right? The dialects is where kind of the accent is brought out there, so it's a little different. It's pretty specific, but point being, there's no like British accent. There's no like any of the cowboy accents or the southern accents or any of those things being present to some form in the Japanese language. So that's why when it comes to like the English dub of things and stuff like that, I hope to see some of these accents pull through, to have fun with it, right? But they just kind of play it safe and be neutral about it, quote unquote, and kind of go with the California accent or just like a neutral American accent, and it's just kind of how it goes a lot of times, especially with like stuff like Genshin Impact, for example. They're all the English speakers speak with a neutral accent. It's just, I don't know. They could play around with it, I think, and it should be fine. But at least here, I thought it was pretty cool. I think it's funny Garp having an Irish accent, Kobe with the English accent, so on and so forth. So that's something I would like to give kudos for. Just the accents alone. So some of those dialogue deliveries were enhanced because of those accents. So I do would like to give points for that. The gore, yes. The gore seems to be, I don't know, this is like a positive or a negative here, so that's why I'm kind of like bringing it up now. Was unexpected. You actually see like people getting chopped in, or somebody getting chopped in half. Besides Buggy, of course, but the gore definitely is kind of all over the place, though, I will say as well. While unexpected when it happens, it's very inconsistent because it's like, okay, you have a dude literally getting chopped in half. You see like some of the blood and stuff like that, but then you just see like when people get punched or cut or sliced, it comes off as dry or just very mild and just held back, and I'm just like, what? So the gore is very all over the place, very inconsistent at that. There's a lot of implied violence, right? You see like off-screen, impacts and hits and stuff like that. That, yeah, leave it to your imagination. Like, ooh, that had to hurt, but it's just kind of all over the place, and that could either be a detriment or positive for some people. But when it happens, it's pretty cool. But when it gets held back, like a lot of times, then it's like, so that's kind of weird. So I hope to see more consistency on the violence and stuff like that. When it's of course needed, when it's when it's necessary. There are this is like, I guess, more on the fan service side. They did interesting things with the title cards. They had like different characters being represented in those titles, which was really cool actually. You see different designs besides the default Luffy skull or whatever. You see different other variations and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. It's like a nice little touch to it. So I like that. But it's like more tied to that fan service stuff, which I kind of forgot to mention. The casting, I would say, this is one of the important things, was I would say pretty decent overall. It's the best you could have done with the given circumstances, right? Luffy, the casting for Luffy was fine, I think. I can forgive it. Zoro. Zoro is my favorite character, first off, right? My favorite Straw Hat, so I have to be extra hard on it, right? So, forgive me for my Kenyu, but, I'm sure it's the writing and stuff like that, the direction, but there was too much of that, like that, I don't work for you. You talk like, he talks like this most of the time. That kind of stuff. So he kind of like comes off like kind of like Raven from Teen Titans, and of course Teen Titans' Raven has moments of like emotions, smiles, yells and stuff like that. Of course gets angry, but when it comes to other emotions, it's rare, but there is context to it, of course. Zoro here is too stoic, and Zoro has, in the original story, of course, has a great balance of being badass, stoic, stern, but also being cocky, confident, has the skills to back it up kind of thing, and has a shit-eating grin on his face, Like, he's just, he knows it, right? And he knows it when to do those things against his opponent and stuff like that. He's got the stuff to back up, and you just believe it when you see Zoro. And that's like some of the things why I love Zoro, besides the three sword style and stuff like that. Also disappointing here, it's a bit of a minor spoiler, but he never gets to yell out any of the attack names, even though that's what Zoro does literally from the get-go. but I guess we'll have to wait and see about that. But yeah, this Zoro, too stoic. I like to see a little more bombasticness from Zoro. Yeah, he cracks jokes here and there and comes off as like sarcastic and stuff like that, but that's not what all Zoro is, you know? Especially in the early part of One Piece. In fact, there were parts where Zoro was just like straight up laughing at Luffy um, early on, I think. So a lot of that gets missed, unfortunately, and it just comes off as very stoic, deadpan, or stern, too stern, in fact. But otherwise, the look on Zoro is pretty good, pretty decent, even with the green hair and all that stuff. That's fine in my book. And it's a similar case with Nami, right? Nami is usually very lively. She's very like, oh, please help me, help me, Luffy, please. And then she loves money, so she's just like, it's like super gritty about it, and kind of like an asshole, right? As well. But Nami here is very stoic, also stern, tough, and quite the fighter in this one too, which I'm kind of okay with, but it's a little weird to see Nami being like very combat heavy in comparison to Nami in the original story. And in fact, they kind of went for like a more like a Black Widow thing with this Nami in Netflix version. It's a little weird to see her do that sort of stuff. They kind of just like I guess somebody wanted Nami to be like Black Widow of the team. It's kind of weird and funny at the same time. Because usually Nami is not a fighter; she's a coward, kind of like Usopp, and but also is very lively. She's very bright in comparison to the other people as well, but very naggy. She's kind of like a older sister towards her crewmates and stuff like that. She has a lot. She has a lot going on for sure. But with that said, I liked her performance during sort of like the revelation with Arlong and screams out Arlong's name and stuff like that as she, does something. And I thought that was well performed, I would admittedly say. So that part was very well done, specifically. But otherwise, this Nami is a little too stoic as well in comparison to the original Nami. But it's weird because the most Nami I've was able to pick up on in Netflix series is when in the very beginning there was a scene with Nami pretending to be minor spoilers, but she's on a boat dying, and that's the part where I see the most Nami because that's what Nami did in the anime as well. And thanks for the rescue, that whole scene. So that stuff, yeah, that's like pretty cool to kind of see it in the live action side of things. But that's all the Nami that I see, right? Otherwise, it's just like the stoic Nami, mostly throughout the rest of the stuff, Otherwise, yeah, I mean, the basics is intact of each character for sure, but there needs to be a little more for some of them, right? But back on to Luffy, right? Luffy definitely, yeah, yes, has traces of Luffy, but because of the missing context and stuff like that, it doesn't quite help build up Luffy to be that character, right? That makes him quite popular in a number of communities, right? Like, or a number of circles. He's not just a shonen character. There's quite more to him if people are willing to pay attention to it. But that, of course, gets lost in here. So that's why this Luffy comes off a little more surface level. Woo! Yeah, I want to be the best. You get some hints, but ultimately it gets a lot of it gets lost because of the missing storylines within each arc. So you don't really get to see the many sides of Luffy here in that regard. Otherwise, what was performed here, for the most part, with these actors was well done, or with the given the material and stuff like that. They did their best, of course. What more could have been done with what was given here. So I don't hate any of the character performances. It's just I wish for a little more in these certain very specific areas. Because again, I love One Piece, so I can't help it. Usopp was pretty okay. Brought out the pretty basic stuff of Usopp. He's a coward, yes. He's a sniper, yes, with the slingshot. That's Usopp, right? Even without the nose, it is definitely from the best. But it definitely has like all the basics of Usopp. But again, context missing. So you don't really get to see the cool nuances with Usopp, right? Like you kind of don't get why he's doing the lying. Kinda, you only like kind of, it's only kind of glossed over, unfortunately. And that's just again lost opportunity here to get to know the characters better and help uplift One Piece as a whole. Sanji here, definitely get more notes of it. And you kind of get to see his past, how it built him and stuff like it built him to what he is and stuff like that. But again, a number of the context gets missing. You miss out on the nuances with Sanji, but at least all the basic notes are there for Sanji as well. And I think, in fact, this is probably the best iteration of the Straw Hats. Is Sanji, I would say, and then Usopp, and then maybe Luffy, and then Zoro and Nami kind of tied together because they're both stoic. But Sanji here definitely does the best here of all the characters, which is pretty awesome. He even smokes, not chain smokes, but smokes no less. So that was like, whoo, man, because that's like kind of a defining trait of Sanji, the smoking. So I'm glad to see that at least happen here. So that's kind of what I'm talking about, right? Like they attempt at least throw in a trace of that into somewhere, right? If only they kind of did that with some of the context with Luffy, some of the context with Usopp, so on and so forth. At least they snuck in that smoking here and there, right? Just like a note of that at least. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, so that's pretty much all the Straw Hats, right? So the rest of them, right, the main villains and everything, I already said that, like the nuances and the movements, the motions, the sort of the hand gestures and all the characteristics are basically there. It's, yes, the live action iterations of these characters. You kind of believe them for the most part. But again, there's a lot of missing stuff. At that point, what could you do, But it's still it's not completely winning me over, so to say. Let me get that out of the way. But at least they tried. There is effort, and that's kind of like the emphasis I wanted to next mention, is that this is definitely having more heart than a number of these live action iterations or adaptations. You definitely see the heart that they're trying to shove into this iteration of One Piece here. They try to keep the spirit of it, right? But because of the 8 episodes, because of the pacing, they just couldn't fit all the other important bits that really uplift this series to where it is, right? With the original story, at least. A lot of missing characters, just a lot of missing scenes and storylines and all that stuff. It just, yeah, it can't be helped, but I just can't help but to mention that, But at least with these characters, they're paid respect to an extent. However, there is one character whose powers are quite butchered just because they wanted to, like, either make them stronger or whatever it is. I've noticed, right? Some of these villains kind of buff, while there are inconsistencies with the powers, right? With some of the Straw Hats, they're in 1 minute they're like super strong, like, oh, and then the other minute, one freaking wine bottle smash over somebody's head instantly knocks him out. It's like, that's really weird, right? They're like glass cannons, I guess you could say, So, of course, there are a number of deviations and stuff like that. That's something I don't really see as a negative, but but when it comes to missing stuff, right? That's where it bothers me to that extent. But anyways, that's really all the general notes I have on hand, without spoiling things, of course. So, um, really, I mean, if this were to be some sort of food, right? If I had to make a food analogy for One Piece live action, I would say right now it is like imitation crab. It is edible, yes, but it is imitating, crab, right? Of course, and of course, One Piece, the original story, is like the spider crab. It's like the crab the big giant king crab you see in Hokkaido or whatever, right? They rip off the legs. It's super good. It's got a lot of little nuances, little complex, not complexity, but it has enough complexity to, well, stand out quite a bit from the seafood side of things, right? Especially when it's really good and fresh, right? You get to taste like the sweetness, the softness, the tenderness, right? Just that maybe umami, the savoriness, I don't know, but especially when you once dip it into like butter or shoyu, holy crap, I bet it'd be super good, right, for a number of people. But there is imitation crab, which is very accessible in grocery stores, and that's like a member of the general public would buy over the real stuff, right? Because it's expensive, it's hard to get, you know. Except that One Piece, the original story, isn't necessarily hard to get, but that's the grand stuff. And Netflix One Piece is kind of the imitation, but not I'm not trying to paint that in a negative light, but it's definitely missing parts, kind of like what imitation crab is doing, right? That's what it's built to be, you know. One Piece here, though, Netflix One Piece does have the heart. It does have the passion. They put the time into the sets, which I don't know if I got to mention that, but the sets were great. The ships were great. It's practical stuff, you know. It's nice to see the practical effects coming to play quite a bit here. And actually, I almost forgot the CGI effects. And I actually grew to get used to it, right? It's not too bad once you actually like, sit down and stuff like that and give it a watch. It's really like a lot of the other stuff, the other negatives that really bring my attention rather than the the CGI effects, which that of itself is probably a good thing overall. So the stretching powers, it's like, yeah, okay, you get used to it, but it's really the other stuff that gets really rough in comparison, which is the story, right? The pacing and all that. But again, there's a lot of practical stuff. I'm glad to see that. I am all for the practical stuff and special effects instead of like visual effects, which is all more about CGI and stuff like that, computer and digital effects. They do have a place, but when it's overused in a number of movies, then it's like, ugh. But at least here, they really actually did some cool stuff with the sets, including like, having their own little ocean or whatever, built on like at an airport or something like that, or some empty lot or something. It's pretty cool of how they built those, and they even have their own little shipyard. It's really cool, So give credit to that. Even Going Merry looks pretty cool, live action, right? So that's definitely one of the redeeming factors, right, of this series. And I think even Cowboy Bebop have some cool sets too. Admittedly, that's like one of the diamonds in that big rough. So that definitely carries over to here. Very respectable in the sets. I definitely like the cities. It's just the lighting that kind of gets bothersome, because a lot of that is like it turns brown. It's just I could use some more color. It's more like all I can ask. It gets musky, brownish in a number of places. Yeah, they try to emulate that pirate sort of tavern mood, but I think it's a little much. Maybe a little more, just a bit more neutral notes would be fine. But otherwise, the sets were pretty cool. I will admit that, and even like the weapons, right, were pretty cool. Even though they only showed up for a brief time, at least they paid attention to those aspects as well. So, yeah. And generally speaking, yes, there are some mishaps with the fan service, how powers work and stuff like that. But overall, there is fan service to be had. It's very respectable. I like their attempt at it. It's very admirable. But, you know, is this really breaking the curse or anything like that? No, I think it definitely doesn't. Because, you know, this is just one anime, right? That has a good overall good outcome of it for right now. That being said, it's not for me, but I definitely see the positive effects of it with the exposure it's getting, the overall performance with the rest of the audiences, with the Netflix audience, and it's a W for Oda, whether this was going to be bad or good, right? Because one, he's not really putting his money into it; he's just giving his permission for it and his time a little bit, so he doesn't lose out on the finances side of things. And not only that, he gets exposure to it no matter what. So no matter what the outcome was, it's going to bring more eyes to One Piece, right? So it's a W for him no matter what. It just so happens that it's turning out to be pretty good, right? Which is something that I can see it definitely see as a W and a positive overall. So I may be not the one of the ones that likely that are completely liking this, but I like that the fact that One Piece is the one that's not being the joke of the town. A lot of people liking it. Hey, that works for me, right? I love One Piece, and I hope to see more of that with other people as well. So I'm kind of like more in the middle, a little more on the negative side of things, because again, it's just not for me, and I would say it's not breaking the anime curse or anything like that, anime live action curse. I have to see more to be convinced that the live action anime curse is broken, right? We got Yu Yu Hakusho coming up. That has to be good also, right? Along with some of the past ones like Rurouni Kenshin, right? You just can't have a few stepping stones and call it a day, right? If you don't have the stepping stones to go to, to walk on the path, what's the point? If you only have a few of them, you ain't gonna go anywhere, man. So that's why I don't see it as, breaking the curse or anything like that, or or the right step the step in the right direction. But it is one stepping stone nonetheless, I guess, with One Piece, and I'm glad to say that. But if there's only gonna be the 2 or maybe 3 stepping stones, what's the point? Because the bar is still too low. There is still plenty of bad ones out there with only a few good ones. So of course, for me, I can't call it a day. When other people are saying yes, this is breaking the curse and stuff like that. I get it, but I don't think it is. So, generally speaking, that's it for the review. Thank you very much for sticking with this one. I know it's long because I really like One Piece, but if I were to give it a score, with all that being said, right, it's going to be a 6 out of 10. 5 being average, so 5 being in the middle, so that's average for me. It's a little above average because of the fan service, the respect, the heart put into it. I'm glad that they are paying attention to it. There's no like weird like political pandering or self inserts or anything like that. Any political messaging. This is One Piece, right? The One Piece story is relatively intact. With that being said, right, there are basic beats to it, but the fan service and all that stuff, the respect is definitely there. So I definitely give points for that. The sets were great. The casting was pretty decent at least. There were concepts that were very interesting to explore, but the execution could have been better. And that's just a lot of what it is. Execution is lacking. The pacing was definitely a detriment to it. So the proper context is lost. That number of One Piece magic is lost. So it does come off as a imitation, but it's kind of like a cover band. Yeah, it's not the original band, but this is a band with heart, passion, and they just want to celebrate it. So I'm all for it. So it gives a 6 out of 10 from me, and that's pretty much it on my general review for live action One Piece from Netflix. If you want to stick around for my spoiler side of things, stay tuned, and I'll see you pretty soon.